Welcome to Nach Simanim. I'm Jacob Thomas, and today we will be learning Shmuel aleph perek yud chet. This perek begins with the deep brotherly bond and love that David and Yonatan, Shaul's son, feel for each other, where they forge a deep connection founded on friendship and brotherhood. And this bond is shown by Yonatan giving David his royal robe and a sword, a bow, and a belt. And David goes on to do many successful military missions, causing the hearts of the nation to love him as their hero. Then, as David is coming home, there begins this song that the women in the town start chanting. How Shaul has slain thousands, but David has slain tens of thousands. This cuts very deeply into the heart of Shaul, who is already afraid of David and increases his fear of losing his kingship to this man whom everybody loves very deeply. And this leads to a bitter jealousy and paranoia that convinces Shaul that David is coming for his throne. In order to try to stop him, there are times in which Shaul has his paranoia so strongly that he throws a spear at David, who is actively playing harp, leading David to try to escape and dodge it. Then he thinks, okay, how will I get David to die in war? I'll make him distracted by my daughter and say, hey, if you get 100 Plishtim dead, I'll give you my daughter. First, he says his first daughter, who then Merav, who he gives to another woman, and then he gives his younger daughter, Michal, after David brings 200 Plishtim dead back to Shaul, the foreskins, and then Shaul realizes that this man is going to take my throne, and David becomes his permanent enemy. As a recap, we have the covenant between David and Yonatan as a binding of their friendship. We have Shaul's jealousy and his explosion of throwing spears at David, and his from the woman's song thinking that David is going to take over his throne. And we have the marriage of David to Michal, who, after David, gives 200 Plishtim foreskin to Shaul. So we are on perek yud chet, so we use a chuppah, because yud chet kind of looks like a chuppah, and ben shmona asrei l'chuppah, as it says in Pirkei Avos. David hugs his friend under a chuppah the night before his wedding, then leaves to war. This reminds us, we have David hugging his friend, which reminds us how David and Yonatan have a deep connection at the beginning of the perek described, in which they have this deep brotherly bond, and he's under the chuppah the night before his wedding, which reminds us how David marries Michal at the end of the perek, because Shaul tried to kill him in his fear and paranoia of David by trying to say, hey, maybe I could get him distracted by trying to marry my daughter, that he'll die in war. And he then leaves to war, because this reminds us how David was a big, strong warrior that became a war hero among the people. So one more time with the siman. David hugs his friend under the chuppah the night before his wedding and then leaves to war. Okay, for perek bat chazar, starting with perek yud dalet, in which we use a juggler. Yonatan juggles swords in celebration as his father makes a vow about honey. This reminds us how Yonatan defeated the Plishtim secretly, leading them to run away, while after they ran away, his father made a vow that no one should eat, which Yonatan didn't know of, ate, leading Shaul to try to figure out who actually ate, finds it's his son, was going to kill him, but then doesn't because he gets bribed, showing corruption. Perek tetvav, we use a fruit bowl. Shmuel yells at Shaul for sparing the king of fruit bowls. This reminds us how Shaul was supposed to kill all of Amalek, but he spared the sheep and King Agag, the king of Amalek. Shmuel is told by God that this happened. He comes to Shaul, he rebukes him, and it's not a very good ending for their relationship, where Shmuel then no longer sees Shaul anymore. Perek Zayin, we use an acrobat with big toes. Shmuel anoints the big-toed acrobat playing the harp while he tried to find his balance ball. This reminds us how Shmuel then went to try to anoint the next king, which he finds David among all of his brothers. We also have a description of David playing the harp for Shaul, the king, who is having lots of trauma and tantrums from an evil spirit. And that leads us to perek Yud Zayin, in which we have Goliath coming. We use a used car salesman. David throws stones at the used car salesman for his blasphemous prices. This reminds us how Goliath came and was blaspheming all of Bnei Yisrael. And David comes and is so mad at this. He first comes to bring food, but gets so outraged by this, he comes to Shaul and says, I'm going to feed him. After an initial rejection, he goes, he throws the stone straight at the noggin, at the forehead, and Goliath falls on the floor and is dead. Now we're going to do an 8+1 question pop quiz. 7+1 question pop quiz. In which perek does David defeat Goliath with a single stone? Perek Yud Zayin. In which perek do David and Yonatan make a covenant of friendship? Perek Yud Chet. In which perek does Shmuel secretly anoint David as the future king? Perek Tet Zayin. In which perek is Shaul officially rejected for sparing Agag? Perek Yud Gimel. In which perek does Shaul throw a spear at David playing the harp? Perek Yud Chet. In which perek does Yonatan unknowingly break his father's oath by eating honey? Perek Yud Daled. In which perek does David marry Shaul's daughter, Michal? Perek Yud Chet. Now, Shoftim bonus question. In which perek does Gidon scare Midian by breaking jars and shouting? Perek Zayin. Shoftim, perek Zayin. That is it for today. May we be zocheh to finish all of Nach, one perek at a time, and remember it day after day. Have a wonderful day.